Welcome back to the Calling Our Shot podcast. I'm joined by Logan and Sam. I know you guys know who Logan is. You see him on the screen. He's an icon. He's been doing videos daily for the past 4 or 5 months now. Sam, if you know who Sam is, you're a real OG, because that means you were probably watching the podcast all the way back in November when we did our first ever episode. Kind of fizzled out as the NFL season ended, but we're back and we're going to be live every single Wednesday. So you're going to see our daily videos or weekly videos every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll upload a video and we're just going to cover, what's going on in football, whether that's fantasy football, it's college football, you name it. We're going to be covering it, and we're going to stop and we're going to hop right into it because the biggest news of today, and we'll be posting this every Wednesday, Mac Jones officially named the starter for the Patriots. Sam, since you're the newbie, what are your thoughts?
Well, first off, I love that this whole story broke with Bill Belichick an hour before the cut, saying that he was so happy with the progress that he was making it. He was headed in the right direction. And then classic Belichick fashion, what happens? He's off the team. I think it says one of two things. One, that he was really unpleased with Cam Newton's performance, or two, that he really just liked Mac Jones and what he saw as a prospect. And that I think it's going to lead towards a really big Mac Jones year. My bold prediction, in fact, is that I think he's going to usurp Josh Allen, maybe even be the best quarterback in the AFC East after this year. I mean, Belichick doesn't mess around. He knows what he's doing. I think this hot take, he's going to be the new QB of the AFC East.
All right, before you click away from the podcast, because sorry for bringing on Sam. Logan, you chime in. You chime in with this.
Okay. First of all, have you lost your mind on him? He's just a rookie, right? And he's going to go through some ups and downs. I think this story, what I took away from it, is about Cam Newton. And obviously, you see the Panther, and you see it behind there. How the mighty have fallen. How you can go from the 2015 MVP of the one-loss regular season Carolina Panthers to now getting usurped by a rookie. That's what I took away. It's really sad for Cam. And I mean, how bad do you have to be to let a rookie win out that job? I mean, every sign and every indication was that Mac Jones was going to sit just for a little bit, right behind Cam. And no. That's not what we got.
Yeah, it was kind of, I was surprised. I won't lie to you. I thought Cam Newton, very similar to, we do a whole podcast on the Bears situation with Andy Dalton and Justin Fields. I figured it would be kind of a similar thing where you'd see Cam for the first, 3 to 4 weeks of the season. Then they'd be like, all right, fine, Mac Jones, time to shine. Caught me off guard. I mean, I'm not surprised they let go of Cam Newton. It felt like it was more of like a respect thing, knowing Cam. I mean, Logan, you dealt with him as a Panther. He's kind of a diva. But he probably was just like, you know what? I don't really want to be a backup to this guy. I know I'm never going to start this season. Let me go sit back, be the 33rd quarterback out there. Basically, probably if, someone like Dak Prescott or someone like that gets injured again like this year, I feel like Cam Newton's your number one guy personally that you'd be picking up. I can't think of many better quarterbacks out there other than him. But awfully bold of a take for you, Sam, coming right onto the channel and just spouting those claims, but I like it. I like the bold prediction, and that we're going to move into. We got Logan's bold predictions. We're also going to cover some running back injuries and your questions. So I asked you guys on Twitter for a couple questions, and we're going to cover those in a little bit. Logan, hit me with your bold prediction of the 2021-2022 season.
Yeah, so we're talking about rookies, right? And I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be a worse than a top 20 quarterback in fantasy football. Look, I mean, there's just so much that can go wrong for a rookie in his first year. And did you watch preseason? Did you watch Trevor Lawrence running for his life? Because I did. And I think that is just bad signs in Jacksonville. One of his weapons, Etienne, is already down. Do you like the receiving core? Do you like DJ Chark? I love DJ Chark, but do we love him enough to be that 1-2 punch with Laviska Shenault? And I mean, I just don't think he's set up well. And with Urban Meyer, first-year head coach, I think Trevor Lawrence is really going to struggle in Jacksonville. And I think there's going to be a lot of quarterbacks better than him this year. Just because he's a number one overall pick, everyone might assume, hey, he's going to be good, top half of the quarterback class. I don't think so. I think the rookies like Trey Lance, Justin Fields, even Zach Wilson, I would take any of those players over Trevor Lawrence.
Interesting take. Question for you, just random, who do you want? Sam Darnold or Trevor Lawrence in fantasy football? Who would you take?
Yeah, I'm taking Sam Darnold. He's
Okay.
got better weapons and a better surrounding cast. I mean, come on.
Hey, we're
Homer
Jets
pick,
fans.
maybe,
We understand. Sam, what were you gonna say?
No, I was just going to say, I mean, it's all about the system that you guard into, right? And again, not to go back to Mac Jones, but he's coming into a Bill Belichick system. That's a system for winning, right? Trevor Lawrence is coming into this gimmicky Urban Meyer. What's going on here? Where's the defense? What are they doing? So I agree with you. I think as good as his raw talent looks, he's just not having anywhere near the pieces he needs to have around him to be successful. And that injury to his running back, absolutely, is going to be another blow. So, yeah, no, I agree with you. I think Trevor Lawrence is certainly not going to perform the best of all the rookie QBs. I think he's going to be towards the first rounders, maybe towards the bottom this year, honestly.
Yeah, I guess I have to stand up for Trevor Lawrence. I don't know. I didn't really think I'd come into this segment standing up for him, but I think there's two things. One, you can be a good fantasy QB and not be a good real life QB. So I do think, with that team around him, sure, he doesn't have a lot of weapons. Sure, he might be running for his life, but that means that could lead to more rushing yards than really anticipated. And there's not a lot of guys out there that will probably get as many rushing yards as Trevor Lawrence this year. But my second one is garbage time still counts. And that's, I don't think this Jags team will be very good at all. I don't think the Urban Meyer scheme will work year one, but I do think they'll it's Trevor Lawrence. I think he's very talented. I do think he'll have a lot of garbage time points. We saw Gardner Minshew last year. Even Nick Foles be serviceable in fantasy football. Now, I don't know if they were top 20 in terms of fantasy points, but I don't know. I don't think you should be throwing him under the bus. I mean, he's being drafted as, I don't know, like QB 12, 13 off the board. So kind of saying he's going to go much lower than that, not even be a startable, that's not even a word, but person in fantasy football at his current ADP. Now, my bold prediction, and I don't know if you got what you guys will say to this one, it's about Antonio Brown, and it is that he will lead the Bucs in fantasy points at the wide receiver position. I think he's going to outscore not only Mike Evans, but also Chris Godwin. I'm talking about Antonio Brown. We know as talented he is as he is. I mean, sure, he made a fool of himself off the field, but you got to think about Antonio Brown. He's still very talented. We saw him have a big role in the Super Bowl run. And I believe once he started last year, which I think was around week 8 or week 9, I believe he had a 20% target share last year with Tom Brady. We know Tom Brady loves Antonio Brown. I'm all in, and you're getting a super great value. I think he's being taken as like the 41st wide receiver off the board. And I think he's going to outscore Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And I'm laying my hammer on that.
See, here's the problem with any Bucs wide receiver is that all three of those guys are wide receiver ones, right? And so what's going to happen is each week's performance is just going to completely depend on volume that they're receiving from Tom Brady. They're all good, don't get me wrong, and I love them all as players. But as fantasy assets, they're just too unpredictable. So, one, I will push back that, yes, Antonio Brown will not be the Bucs' #1 fantasy wide receiver. But two, I don't even know if I'd touch a Bucs wide receiver. There's just too much unknown, right? We've seen that in weeks before where, Mike Evans has a great week and Godwin does nothing. And then Godwin's production skyrockets. It's like, I don't know. I'm staying away. But I think Antonio Brown, clearly, yes, Tom Brady took him underneath his wing. He's got a soft spot for him. We all want him to come back and be the Antonio Brown of 4 years ago, but he will still be wide receiver 3 on that team.
I'm going to kind of rally to Austin's defense on this one. What really, when you're drafting as late as where Antonio Brown is, it's about value. And I look, when you're drafting fantasy football, I'm always around value. Who are some of the players that would go around where you would draft AB? Like, do you know off the top of your head?
I mean, the guys you got to think about are, like the Devontae Smiths of the world, those kind of guys. Now, Jamar Chase is much earlier, but yeah, Devontae Smith, I think Brandon Cooks, they're even above him. Jerry Duty's, Cortland Sutton's are all above him. There's a lot of people above him. Like I said, there's 4. He's going right around like the Corey Davis, Marvin Jones Jr. kind of realm.
Well,
exactly.
Right. Michael Thomas territory too, right?
Yeah, and we're going to talk about Michael Thomas. So hold your horses in a second, but yeah, I'm in on Antonio Brown if you can get him at ADP, and I think we could all agree at his ADP he's a great value. Now, whether or not, will he be the #1 scoring? I'm going to say he will be because I do think he's a great value, and I think he's a really great receiver. I just think Tom Brady's got too much invested in him, and part of me, as a Tampa native, I got to cheer on the Bucs, and I think that this year Tom Brady's trying to go for MVP. I think that's something that he just got the Super Bowl. just got Super Bowl MVP. Wouldn't he love to add another MVP trophy onto his thing? And that means he's going to be throwing the ball a lot because he's not going to get it while running it. I don't know. Something to think about.
You got insider info, though, because they have sleepovers. Antonio Brown lived with Tom Brady. So, like, if there's ever going to be a player that he's going to target and look for, it's AB. So, you know what? I don't think you're all that bold. I like it. I think it's reasonable.
Yeah, no, I'm all in. And Sam, you already jumped the gun, and we're going to skip to a question from one of our icons on the channel. Logan knows him. I know him. Sam, you're about to know him. His name is Nerfy Derek. Now, that's not his name on Twitter, but he sent me this question, and we know he gave us all the Nerfies for baseball season. And he asked, what are your thoughts about Michael Thomas? Is he worth the stash? I mean, like I said, he's going wide receiver 35 to 40-ish off the board. Now, luckily, we're filming this podcast after all the Tuesday cuts. And we do know Michael Thomas will start the season on the PUP list, meaning that he will be out normally it's out the first 6 games, but since the Saints have an early bye, he will be out the first 5 games and have the bye week in there. So potentially return week 7. Are you stashing him on your bench? What are you going to do with him?
So I think this is all about how good of a draft you have in your first, 5 or 6 rounds, whether it be an auction or a snake. But if you can afford to put him on your bench and you don't need to rely on him, he is absolutely a guy you want to sub in for your wide receiver 2 or your wide receiver 3 come deep playoff time. I mean, let's not forget, Jameis Winston's the quarterback on that team. And, 30 interceptions, 30 touchdowns, you're getting a lot of yards. I don't think that Saints team is going to be great, right? And I think they're going to be throwing the ball a lot. And Michael Thomas, yes, he will be nothing the first half of the season. But what matters most in fantasy is playoffs. And come playoff time, he will absolutely be his former self. And so if you can get him at that, draft value, I think you have to pull the trigger on him.
Or one, bold of you to assume that Jameis is going to be the starter all year, right? They have an irrational love for Taysom Hill on that team. I don't know what it is. I don't know what relationship Taysom has with Sean Payton, but Taysom Hill, not so bold prediction, will start at least 1 or 2 weeks at quarterback. And if it could be later in the season, who knows? If you got Michael Thomas, sit on your team, that's kind of a waste of a roster spot all the way up until that point, just kind of assuming that Jameis Winston starts. And Jameis Winston, yeah, I mean, he was okay statistically with the Bucs, fantasy wise, but look, there's just bold of you to assume that it's going to be always the Jameis show. The Taysom, they probably want to go Taysom and Kamara a lot more than you realize.
Well, no, I think you got to realize, though, what you just said. Sean Payton loves Taysom Hill that much, right? And he still isn't the starter, right, against Jameis Winston. So it's like if he really loved him and he really has invested so much and tried to build the system around him that he's not even going to give him the week 1 start, I think that's enough right there that they've seen that Taysom Hill is not a future full-time quarterback. He doesn't have that capability. Great in his gadget gimmick role. And he's even had production those games where he had Michael Thomas on his team last year. They had good rapport. But with Jameis Winston, it's going to be even better. And so, again, don't rely on him as your wide receiver 1, 2, or 3. But if you can snatch him, in a late round and you feel like your team's already good enough to be able to get yourself a decent shot into the playoffs, that's the kind of overpower stud that you bring in late in the season will absolutely throw you into a playoff contention. So
yeah, potentially. I think he might be worth. I mean, I think it all comes down to what your roster looks like at that point. But I'm looking at the ADPs, and right now, I'll ask you guys. Right now, going at the same pick, 94. That's their ADP, so that's right around like 8th, 9th, 10th round. Yeah, Devontae Smith, the rookie, or Michael Thomas. Who are you taking?
Yeah, that's easy. That's the rookie with upside. Come on. I mean, you're going to be stashing. It's pretty much going to be a waste of a roster spot. And for anybody that had Michael Thomas last year, you know what a waste of a roster spot means, right? Like
I can echo that.
Yeah, exactly. Boom, right there. No, I mean, it really does come down to also want to counterpoint Sam. I mean, what happens when Jameis goes out there and is Jameis, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. What type of game is that? And how is Sean Payton going to defend that against the media? He's going to feel pressure to start his little gadgety quarterback, as you called him. And then you got a declining value in Thomas and a rising value in a rookie. I mean, give me the rookie with upside all day long.
I think let's not forget who are the other wide receivers on that Saints team. I mean, we all know we're UCF homers here, right? But Traquan Smith and Callaway. I mean, there's no clear wide receiver 2. There's no clear wide receiver 1. It will be the Michael Thomas show upon his return. And it's crazy how quick we forget about things in fantasy. 2 years ago, he was the consensus number 1 wide receiver. No one was even near him, right? He was going the same range as like top high-end running backs. Michael Thomas was the guy, right? And so if he comes back, that quarterback, again, not Drew Brees, but Jameis Winston can throw the ball around. I think I want him. And I don't want a Philadelphia Eagle rookie wide receiver. We've known their track record. We know how they do with developing young wide receiver talent and past drafts. So no, got to play it safe. Michael Thomas.
I guess I'll be the tiebreaker personally. Looking at if I'm going in and I need some production out of that 8th or 9th spot, it always comes down to your roster construction. If you're wanting to take some risk, Michael Thomas could win you your league. That probably won't lose your league. But also I think someone like Devontae Smith has the upside his upside's out of this world. I mean, this guy, you saw him in college, was absolutely insanely talented. There's been a lot of questions about, his size, because he's a lanky boy. He's not going to be trucking people. He's not going to run the ball or catch it and run through people like Deebo Samuel and people like that. But this guy's legit. This guy's very talented. And like Sam's point, there's no good receivers on the Eagles either. I mean, you got Jalen Reagor, who made one nice catch in the preseason, and all the Eagles fans are hyped up for him. Then you got Dallas Goedert too there. But other than that, there really isn't a lot of depth on that team either. I think Devontae Smith has the chance for a very large target share that could complement or be equal to what Michael Thomas could see. Now, Michael Thomas, sure, he's the number 1 receiver, but it's not on the Drew Brees-led team. It's on a Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston, which I guarantee you will be much more run heavy than Jameis ever saw in the Bucs, because they were always down. And I do think the Saints are going to try to win games more based on their defense, which, don't forget, is one of the best defenses in the NFL. So I'm in on Michael Thomas. I don't mind taking him at his ADP. He slid a ton. Once people saw him on the PUP list, and I guarantee you now that people see him on that list, I assume his ADP will drop even farther. But speaking of injuries, we've had a ton of injuries this preseason, and Michael Thomas, this is completely different because he waited to get surgery, but we have had a lot of running back injuries, and we're going to go through them, give you our thoughts and opinions, break down those backfields. And we're going to start with the oldest injury so far, and that would be Cam Akers. Now, I was high on Cam Akers this year. He helped my fantasy teams last year towards that playoff run when the guy was insane, especially in the playoffs. He was very good, but he's obviously out for the season, torn Achilles. So now you got the Darrell Henderson show, and they just traded for Sony Michel. Sam, take it away. What do you think? Are you drafting Darrell Henderson in fantasy football? You waiting to draft Sony Michel? How do you think this backfield shakes out?
I really liked it when I thought it was going to be the Darrell Henderson show, right? When it was just going to be this guy, they're pumping him all the carries. Now you bring in Sony Michel, and it's going to be the same thing it was last year when it was Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson. And it was like, what's actually going on? Who's the running back 1? I like him, but I think the addition of Michel absolutely hurts his fantasy value. And so if I'm in between drafting, I think I like someone like maybe J.K. Dobbins replacement over a Darrell Henderson, who I think's volume is certainly going to be impacted from this trade and bringing him in. So I know even Darrell Henderson was battling a thumb injury. It looks like he'll pretty much play week 1. But, I mean, if he doesn't, and then who knows, Sony Michel comes in and has a great game, you never know. I don't love that position. I wouldn't put all my eggs in the Darrell Henderson basket at this point.
Yeah, I can feel that. I feel like that Sony Michel trade was kind of like hey, we're concerned too, and we're not the only ones. I know a lot of fantasy managers out there were hyped for Darrell Henderson, and people were last year when Cam Akers, struggled with injuries out of the gate. Then it kind of became his show, and then he never really took kind of control of it. Malcolm Brown, who's out of there, he's down in Miami. We could talk about that at a future date. I don't know about Darrell Henderson. Personally, I think Sony Michel will get a lot of run. He'll be annoying for any Henderson owner out there. Michel, people forget, this guy was very good. I mean, he came in with high expectations, but he was very good his rookie year in their Super Bowl run for the Patriots. Now, last couple of years, he's dealt with a bunch of injuries. And then last year, he ran the ball well. I don't remember his exact yards per carry, but he ran well. Just wasn't his fault. He was stuck behind Damian Harris and Cam Newton RB2. So I don't, if I were personally if I'm drafting him, I'm probably waiting to draft either of those two guys. I don't mind taking Sony Michel. I don't exactly his RB. He's being drafted around like RB 35, 36, whereas Henderson's going probably like RB 25 to 26. So getting about 10 more running back spots. I think there's a little bit more upside. I mean, I think Henderson's the more explosive guy, but what are your thoughts? If you had to draft one at their current price, who are you taking, Logan?
Neither. I'm avoiding, and it's okay. Look, when you're drafted in fantasy, it's okay to just say I'm avoiding this backfield and I'm avoiding this situation because I just think there are better opportunities out there on a team that you've already seen how non-committal they are towards Henderson and bringing in Sony Michel. I just don't want any part of it. And look, it's fantasy. You don't have to force being in that backfield. You could just say no, I don't want it. That's
wave the white flag. I'm out. No,
well, what I was going to say was when you get through your studs, your 1 through running back 12 studs, I'm not looking for players anymore. I'm looking for backfields that I like, right? And yeah, I mean, when there's a committee like that, I don't know, I'm staying away. I'd rather find someone else who's going to might not be as good of a running back, but at least a larger volume, a larger workload, and target him as my fantasy running back.
Yeah, I mean, Henderson's going in the same. Henderson, here's a good comparison. Henderson or Raheem Mostert? Because Mostert's going to be sharing his backfield. People love Trey Sermon, both going around the same draft pick. I mean, what do you do with that? I feel like once you're in that position, I mean, personally, I'd prefer Mostert, but would it surprise any of us if at the end of by week 6, Trey Sermon, this is his backfield? I don't think so. But that's kind of the realm we're talking about. It's the Mostert range, and it's like the Leonard Fournette. But I think if I were to rank those, I'd probably go Raheem Mostert, Henderson, and then Leonard Fournette, exactly how they are getting drafted at the moment. But speaking of another injury that we're going to talk about, it was the second most recent, Travis Etienne. Obviously, Logan, you already mentioned it. He's out for the year. And that stinks because he was the rookie. He was obviously a rookie out of Clemson, just like Trevor Lawrence. And they were excited for him. And it was interesting where they were getting drafted. Currently, he was being drafted right with James Robinson, I believe around like RB 23, 24, basically back to back. So people didn't know how it would shake out. Well, now it appears to be the James Robinson show, but are you in on James Robinson? I personally think Carlos Hyde's going to be a little annoying. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, Carlos Hyde being annoying is an understatement. El Guapo, right? Who thought we'd talk about a little Carlos Hyde on here? I mean, realistically, it tells you a lot how the Jags drafting Etienne. I mean, you had an absolute fantasy stud in Robinson last year. He came out of nowhere. No one really saw the production coming, but he had such a high volume of just receiving, rushing yards. The Jags just ran this man into the ground, and I don't think it's going to be the same thing this year. I think we're seeing in James Robinson shooting up in draft boards. I think we're seeing a bit of an overreaction to the Etienne injury. Everyone's thinking, oh, James Robinson's just going to be the thing he was last year. But remember, I mean, I kind of think that was more of a statistical anomaly last year with Robinson. I think the Jags are going to be bad once more. They're going to be trailing. So you're going to have to rely a lot on Robinson's receiving game. Is he going to have the volume that he had last year? Maybe not. And when it gets down into the goal line back, El Guapo is coming on the field, whether you like it or not. You're gonna see that big boy come in there. You're gonna see Carlos Hyde come in, and it's gonna make a lot of fantasy managers that have James Robinson mad. But he's still a thing, and the Jags are not letting Carlos Hyde go away. He's a Buckeye, and Urban Meyer, ex-Buckeye. There's a little bit of a connection there.
Yeah, there's a reason that they probably brought him in. It's just maybe they tried to do it for depth at first, but I think Carlos Hyde's gonna play a role in this offense. I think you pretty much summed it up clearly. I do think it was a little bit of an overreaction. Right now, he's getting drafted right in front of players like David Montgomery, who I think has a higher ceiling than James Robinson. Personally, I think that's his backfield. And plus, Tariq Cohen will be on the PUP list, I believe. So it's going to be David Montgomery and Damian Williams, however much you think he'll be an impact in that Bears backfield. Sam, you have any additional thoughts before we move on to the next running back?
Well, I mean, just comparing it to the Rams, though, I'd much rather have a James Robinson than a Darrell Henderson. I think he's going to have a lot more workload, and the dual threat that he is. I mean, in a dynasty league, right, you stay away from him because obviously Travis comes back, he's going to be the guy. But this year, I think it is going to be more a closer resemblance to his production from last year than maybe Logan is alluding to. So I think I am high on him. Obviously, he's getting hyped up because there's so few, like, sole running backs, and obviously Carlos Hyde's a detriment to that, but I do like him. I am high on him.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious you take him over Henderson. I mean, they're going about 5-6 rounds apart. That's a no-brainer. But James Robinson, I think a little bit of an overreaction, I'm sure, as the days go on. I mean, the running back position is very shallow, and that's because of injuries, which is our next guy. And it was arguably the highest guy on my list. If you've been watching any of my fantasy football videos, but you haven't watched them, definitely go check them out. I got a bunch and I'll link some in the description. Go check them out in the fantasy football playlist. I've been covering basically every single topic, but my favorite breakout running back, J.K. Dobbins, obviously tore his ACL. I was watching the drive. He had the first carry of the game when I think 12 yards. Then he got a screen pass, and that was when it happened. He tore his ACL. He's out for the year, and it sucks. I won't lie to you. It sucks. And if you drafted, and this is another me preaching, don't ever try not to draft early in your leagues. And because it's unfortunate. And then we'll get into a question right now from one of our people on Twitter. And I appreciate it. Scott Snyder, also a COS All-Star. And he asked, what should he be doing to replace someone like J.K. Dobbins? He drafted Gus Edwards as a backup, as a handcuff, or should he go after a much lesser running back or try another position with upside? When does he drop J.K. Dobbins?
Well, to answer that question, we're just going to go straight into that. I think obviously a guy like Gus Edwards is great because, this year on fantasy, I think running backs more than any year in past I can remember are such a hot commodity. There really aren't a lot of great studs. It gets pretty shallow pretty quickly. And so when you have a role, right, like that Ravens backfield where Gus Edwards, sure, he's not J.K. Dobbins, but from a fantasy perspective, he sure as well might be. I mean, he's going to be getting all that volume. So yes, if you have him as a handcuff, good for you, right? That's why we like players like Tony Pollard and Alexander Madison, not because they're great running backs, because they're running backs in great roles for fantasy, right? That's what they are. So if you can get one of those guys, that's smart, and you should be doing that if you're going to get the stud to go along with them. However, if you now have to decide what am I going to do with that vacancy where I had J.K. Dobbins, I go with someone with upside. I don't try to get one of those lesser running backs because there's so few good ones out there. Get your running backs early, get them good, and then go take upside on what is probably the deepest wide receiver draft that we can remember, right? So I would stay away from trying to take a feeler on a running back like a Michael Carter that's probably going to do nothing. Go with the upside and a different position other than running back.
Yeah, first of all, good job, Scott, for getting the handcuff, right? I always tell myself when I'm drafting fantasy, I'm always like, I want to draft a handcuff player. I never do, and I always regret it. So good job, Scott, for getting Dobbins as handcuff. But I totally agree with Sam. I would go after another position. Like, all right, let's just say I don't know your roster at all, but let's just say maybe you have a mid-tier quarterback. Go draft one of the rookies. All right, go draft Lance or Fields that isn't or maybe they're available in your league. I would go after somebody with an upside that maybe hasn't started or broke out yet with that empty roster spot.
Yeah, I agree with what you both are saying. I think Gus Edwards, well, I do think he will be overdrafted in leagues just because people think, oh, this guy is going to take all of J.K. Dobbins' work. I don't know how to tell you, but he ain't going to do that. Now, he will still, get a lot. He'll see more carries, but I have a feeling they're going to bring in, an outside player. I mean, they still do I think they still have Justice Hill. They still have other guys they like. And we know Gus Edwards, you're in PPR leagues. Well, you might as well just be in a standard league because he's not going to give you any more points in the air. So that's a thing that I think holds him back. And if you think about, I think he'll be going, his ADP hasn't adjusted, but I think he'll be going in that same realm as I think he'll be a little bit behind Josh Jacobs, but, around the Kareem Hunt, Chase Edmonds, Javonte Williams kind of range. And I think that's where he accurately should go. I think this guy will give you a high floor, but very low ceiling personally. Now, could he get into the end zone 10, 12 times? Yes. But I do think there'll be, you'll see Lamar Jackson just running it even more, and we'll see how that goes. Now, another running back injury, which isn't really an injury per se. It is an injury. It's a guy returning from injury. It's Saquon Barkley. And this is a guy that I've been struggling personally ranking and when I'm doing my rankings for running backs and when I get into my draft. And so I don't really want to delve into it. What your thoughts are on him this season? I'm just curious, where would you rank him in your running backs? Now, I'm going to give you the no-brainers who I think should be ahead of him. I personally, if I'm going to rank him, I'm going to rank him right behind Ezekiel Elliott. So that means I got obviously CMC. I got Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Kamara, Ezekiel Elliott, and then number 6 is Saquon Barkley. Do you guys disagree with that? Saquon has as high of a ceiling as really any running back in fantasy, but there's obviously some risk baked into his ADP.
Yeah, this year I'm not taking a risk on him. And so if he's available on the board, but a Nick Chubb or Jonathan Taylor is also available, I'm taking those guys just because I feel like they're safer bets. sure, he might be the guy that he was a couple of years ago and return and just be amazing. I don't like the Giants team. I don't like running backs that have dealt with big injuries like that. So even if he's available, and he is still a running back one, don't get me wrong, he's an elite guy, but I don't want to risk my team on him. So I'm going with one of those other options at running back.
So at what point would you take him though? Because he could slide into drafts all the way to like the end of the first round. Because people might have the same stigma as you, like, hey, this guy has risk. I want to wait to take him. Would you? I mean, if you get to the end of the turn, then
I find myself at the end of the second round and he's on the board, I'm going to grab him for sure. But I don't use my top pick on him, and I don't even know if I use my high second round pick on him. I'd rather lock in a stud wide to stud running back before I take a risk on Barkley. But don't get me wrong, I'm probably going to eat those words because it's Barkley. Probably. But it's just, I don't know. There's guys I'd rather have than him on my team.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Logan?
No, I mean, the talent is just too good to pass up. He shouldn't be out of the first round because, you know what, I'd still take him over, the Eckler, the Jones, the Chubb, the Taylor. I really would. I think he has just tremendous upside, and he is going to make you eat your words, Sam, for sure. I mean, it's that Giants team is so unsexy that Austin couldn't even come up with a player that he liked from their team. He put a trash can, like ultimate disrespect. The Giants are one of those teams that it's not sexy, but he's going to find a way to be fantasy relevant. He's going to find a way to be a top 5 fantasy running back, and he shouldn't slide out of the first round. Absolutely not. No.
Yeah, I think it's one of those guys where
go ahead.
I just think it's one of those guys where if you're at the end of maybe you're at the end of the first round, I would 100% take him. I'm struggling with at pick 8. If I have a pick 8 out of 12 teams, struggling passing on him if he comes to me. I'm hoping personally he doesn't come to me, but there's a good chance he does, and I'm sitting there with him or Jonathan Taylor, and I don't know what I'm going to do. We'll see. Maybe even Austin Eckler. All three of those guys. PPR leagues are different. We're going to move on. We only got a couple minutes left. I got one last social question from Cam the Don on Twitter, and he's in a 2 QB league. I don't know who his first QB is, but I imagine he's better than these other guys that he's asking me about. He's saying, what should you do? He's got Kirk Cousins, Jameis Winston, or Ryan Fitzpatrick, or one of the rookie quarterbacks. If you had to choose between any of those guys, I'll say them again: Kirk, Jameis Winston, Fitzpatrick, or any rookie. Who are you taking? Logan, go first.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big Kirk Cousins fan. Jameis, nah, I'm not on that. I do like Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think he's absolutely going to have a great year with the Washington football team. Yeah, I mean, I look. Would you take even an unproven rookie like Mac Jones or yeah? I mean, I kind of would take Mac Jones over Kirk Cousins or Jameis Winston. Is that blasphemous? Maybe, but I can think of a better quarterbacks than those two for sure.
Sam.
Well, I think the definitely highest floor is Kirk Cousins. You're definitely getting something with him. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Fitzmagic. He's fun to watch as a player all over him. The fantasy, no, I'm staying away. Jameis, I think he's going to light it up and have his games where he goes on fire. And in a 2-quarterback league, maybe you say, I want to take that risk with my second quarterback and try to have the incredibly high ceiling that Jameis sometimes gives you. But his floor is also in the basement, right? Like he can just stink bomb. So I think it's dependent on your strategy. If in your second quarterback I want to lock, 18 points, go with Captain Kirk. He's never the sexy fun choice, but I think he's probably the safest one. But yeah, if you're saying, hey, I have a good quarterback one, let me take some risk here, go with a Mac Jones or with a Jameis Winston. Who knows what they might turn into? So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to choose between those 3 veterans, personally, I'm going to go Fitzpatrick. I think he has probably the best weapons around him. You could say Kirk probably might have some good weapons with Jefferson, Thielen, and Cook. I think Fitzpatrick, he's got Logan Thomas, obviously has Scary Terry, has Antonio Gibson. I think he's got some good weapons, and Fitzmagic, he's going to chuck it. And I think that's what I'm looking for in a 2 QB league. My second QB, obviously my first QB is probably a good guy, a guy maybe like Justin Herbert or maybe even a Brady or Rodgers. Maybe I'm looking for someone that gives me some high upside, not necessarily looking for a high floor kind of guy because I kind of already have that in my QB1 now. So if I had to choose, I'd probably go Fitzpatrick, or personally, I think Trevor Lawrence. I know Logan bashed him earlier. I do think he's going to have a very good fantasy football season, and it's going to be a lot of garbage time, but that's fine. I think he's got some decent weapons around him, and I think they're going to be down a lot. So So I like that. I like Trevor Lawrence personally. Thanks for the question, Cam. Thank you all for submitting your social questions on Twitter. Next week, I'm going to ask you guys for some more questions. So we're going to cover a bunch of stuff next week. Thanks for tuning in. This podcast was brought to you by Odds Jam. So we appreciate Odds Jam for always partnering and sponsoring the podcast and sponsoring all of our videos. If you haven't checked out what Odds Jam is, they're a very useful website, especially if you're into sports betting. You should be checking it out because we do every single morning. Now, that will wrap up for the first ever podcast, not first ever, but the first podcast of the year. We'll be back next Wednesday. And we got some cool topics that we didn't get to. We're talking about our sleeper teams to watch out for this year, teams that we think are a little overrated and will probably underwhelm or underperform this year. We're going to cover some more. Hopefully we don't have to cover any injuries. That'd be nice, but I'm sure there will be some injuries, unfortunately, over the next week or so. But that'll do it. Good luck in your fantasy football drafts. This has been Austin. This has been Logan. This has been Sam. We'll catch you guys next. Peace.